Thanks, Bheki. The ANC in KwaZulu-Natal is holding 2 regional conferences this week in the eThekwini and Harry Gwala regions. Former eThekwini Mayor Zandile Gumede is vying for eThekwini chair against the Metro Municipality Speaker Thabani Nyawose. Much debate has been circulating regarding whether the main items on the agenda should be about leadership or policy. eThekwini has also seen discourse around the ANC step-aside rule. As far as Gumede is concerned, what should the ANC conferences be focused on this weekend? For more on this, we're joined by Deputy Dean of Research and Political Science, Professor Bheki Mngomezulu. A very good morning to you. Thank you for your time. Day 3 of the ANC eThekwini Regional Conference, and marred now by disagreement on voting processes. Was this expected?
Good morning, Mpho. Good morning to your viewers. Maybe first of all, let me just register my disappointment that the chaos that you see happens on the day which is the anniversary of the late Chris Hani, who sacrificed a lot for this country. And I don't think that the ANC and the Alliance will be proud to honor him in this manner. It's a disgrace, to say the least. But the reality of the matter is that when these regional conferences are held on the build-up to provincial conferences and then eventually the national conference, you expect that most of the time will be spent on policy issues, which will be a build-up to the ANC's policy conference scheduled for some time in June, and then, of course, basically preparing themselves for the December election and then subsequently the 2024 national and provincial government election. So then, unfortunately, all those plans are being derailed by certain issues that have nothing to do with the lives of the people of South Africa and then, of course, the general membership of the ANC. Instead, internal squabbles are at play, and then, of course, inconsistencies are also at play, because eThekwini region is not the first region to hold an election. So the question is, how come that in other regions we didn't see the same chaos taking place and you only see it in eThekwini? The only explanation I can give is that KwaZulu-Natal is the biggest province of the ANC, and eThekwini region is the biggest region of the ANC. Therefore, not only are we dealing with the people of eThekwini and the surrounding, but we're also dealing here with people in the ANC who are vying for positions in December, who have vested interest in what happens in this conference. So that is the broader context within which we can interpret the chaos that we have seen happening. We should be knowing by now who is the leader, but we are far from that.
And as far as analysis is concerned on some of the justification in trying to read the situation, especially looking at the loopholes in the step-aside region, the step-aside resolution, and the ANC, of course, allowing Zandile Gumede, for instance, to contest for this position. What sort of perceptions should we be reading into when it comes to the attitude of the region towards the ANC NEC?
You know what, Mpho? Let's speak the truth. I'm told by those who go to church that the truth will set you free. The truth here is that there is a tendency of projecting what I refer to as KwaZulu-Natal's exceptionalism, because the step-aside rule was adopted in 2017, and I'm on record advising people to, in fact, put this thing in the ice, because it was not carefully thought through, and it has caused chaos in the ANC, and the ANC is busy with this renewal agenda, and it's not going to work for as long as there is misinterpretation of the step-aside rule. That is point number 1. Point number 2, the step-aside rule was not meant for KwaZulu-Natal alone, nor was it meant for eThekwini region alone. So then the question becomes, how come that we have all of these issues coming up now, when just recently we had a provincial conference in Mpumalanga, where the top 5 was elected, and then, of course, Mandla Msibu was allowed to participate in the process and eventually emerged victorious. How come that the ANC leadership did not use that as a lesson and then do all that is necessary to make sure that all the issues we are talking about right now are in fact averted? So that is the concern that I'm having. So basically, it boils back to the point I made earlier on, that most of the things that are happening in this conference have very little to do with eThekwini region, but has everything to do with the step-aside rule, which is misconstrued and misunderstood. And they should have done what I advised people to do, that put this thing aside and focus on renewal, elect leaders at the policy conference in June, decide what you want to do, and then take the organization forward. For as long as this step-aside rule remains, the ANC will be in tatters.
ANC KZN chairperson Sihle Zikalala yesterday warned against factionalism in the party, and we're seeing that the battle lines have certainly been drawn in this regard. The time of slate politics, RET factions coming to the forefront, especially as it's now being reported that the unity slate for the eThekwini region has now reportedly been rejected by the RET faction.
You know what, it's easier said than done. It's easier to talk about unity in the ANC, and it's easy to say that we are going to do away with factionalism. Factionalism has been deeply embedded in the ANC. That is the sad reality. And you can see that at the NEC level, you can see it at the NWC, that is the National Working Committee level, and then PECs across the country, and then, of course, at branch level, regional level. It's everywhere. The question is, what has the ANC done since 2017? Because going to the Nazareth conference in 2017, factionalism was the main problem that divided the organization, that led us to where we are right now. Is the organization not learning from its own mistakes? Because if indeed factionalism was a concern and a problem in 2017, 4 or 5 years down the line, one would have expected that these things would have been ironed out. More especially because the president of the ANC, that is Cyril Ramaphosa, assumed this position under the guise that he was coming up with the new dawn, under the guise that he was going to unite the organization, under the guise that he was going to deal with the 9 lost years, when in fact he was part of the process himself. So I think that there is no honesty in the manner in which the step-aside rule was agreed to, or resolution was agreed to, and there is no honesty in terms of implementing that rule evenly. That is why then it works in other provinces, it doesn't work in others. It works in certain regions, it doesn't work in others. That is the problem.
And, you know, opponents very clearly are mounting a fight back to stop ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa, who really faces a crunch test this weekend. You know, looking at the Sunday Times, it says that they're trying to stop him being elected unopposed as at the party's elective conference later this year, lobbying intensely for former Health Minister Zweli Mkhize.
No, there is nothing wrong with that. That is why we call this an election. An election is an election because you have contenders for the position. So there is nothing sinister about that. So it means that if the current president of the ANC and the current president of the party wants to come back in 2022 as the leader of the ANC and then contest the 2024 election, it's within his right to do so. And in fact, branches have the right to nominate him, just like any other person. But similarly, the same branches, the same membership of the ANC has all the right to then suggest someone else who will contest against him. There is nothing wrong about it. All political parties do that anyway. Even you talk about the UK, you talk about the US, any other country, they do that. So there is nothing wrong with that. It's not as if because Cyril Ramaphosa is the president of the ANC now, so it's a given that he must come back unopposed in December. That would be totally wrong.
Professor, there's nothing sinister against it, yes, I agree, but we're looking at the kind of caliber of candidates and perhaps the mounting allegations of corruption, candidates like, you know, allegations against Zweli Mkhize, Supra Mahumapele, Bathabile Dlamini, Ace Magashule, candidates within the RET faction and the allegations, the mounting allegations that they face.
You know what, Mpo, your question is very interesting. You will recall that after the Mpumalanga provincial ANC election, you had Paul Mashatile, in fact, making a very interesting point when he said that it's not clear what is meant by serious allegations. Let's look at 2 allegations. I'm accused of theft, right? And you are accused of murder. So which one weighs more? Both of them are wrong. None of them can be said to be right. But then you have killed, or you are accused to have killed, and I'm accused to have stolen. But then the one who's accused of having killed is allowed to contest. And then the one who's accused of having stolen is not allowed to contest. So that is one point. But then the second point, all the people you have just mentioned, not all of them, in fact, want to contest against Cyril Ramaphosa.
Yes.
And not all of them are saying that we are the ones who are going to be the kingmakers. There are branches that have made the nominations, and then the 400 delegates converging in eThekwini are supposed to elect leaders. So whether those leaders are clean or not, then that is an internal process of the ANC. Because if the ANC has allowed those people to be nominated, they might as well allow them to be elected. The question then is, what happens after they've been elected? Like we saw with Mandla Msebi, he was allowed to contest, he emerged victorious, only thereafter was he then asked to step aside, because it's not supposed to have happened in the first place, which is the point that Mngomezulu Ntuli made, which I totally agree with. If someone is on a step aside, why do you allow the person to be nominated in the first place? And then once the person has been elected, you come back and say, by the way, you have been subjected to this step aside rule. There is no logic there. It doesn't make sense, honestly.
And if elected to the position, of course, we, as you make mention of the complicated political scenario we saw in Mpumalanga, if elected to position, Zandile Gumede will not be able to occupy her case until she's cleared of whatever, criminal elements, cases around her, until that matter is concluded. What then happens to the eThekwini region, the leadership and the direction of that region?
The president has already been set, with the Mpumalanga case that I've just referred to. Mandla Msebi was elected as the treasurer of the ANC in that province. But because of the step-aside rule, he was then asked to step aside again. And then what happened? His position remained unoccupied. Speedy Mashele, who is the deputy chair, was then asked to occupy that position. So because that precedent has already been set, we don't have to guess what's going to happen in the event that Zandile Gumede emerges victorious. If she emerges victorious against Thabani Nyawose, what is going to happen is that the leadership of the ANC is going to ask her to step aside, and then they will get someone else to occupy her position, which is why then the question that was asked by Mngomezulu Ntuli becomes critical here. Why do you allow the person to contest in the first place if you know that after the election has been concluded, the person is not going to occupy the position? But it's clear what is going to happen, obviously. Once she wins, then she's not going to take the position, which means then that whoever wanted her to occupy this position, for whatever reason, will then go back to the drawing board and say, what then? And that is not supposed to have arisen in the first place if people understood what the 2017 resolution said and what it entailed, and then all the dynamics involved. That is why I say that resolution was taken out of emotions and was not carefully thought through. Now that the ANC is implementing it, reality is sinking in, and it's too late to reverse it because they failed to listen when I was advising that put this thing aside because you don't understand it yourself. Then we're not going to be able to implement it for as long as you don't understand what it entails.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for weighing in on this discussion here. Analysis by Deputy Dean of Research and Political Sciences from the University of the Western Cape, Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, as we are into day 3 of the ANC Regional Conference in eThekwini, of course, marred by some disruption and contestation to the voting process, which is something that we're monitoring very closely. Up next, the very latest